Hi everyone, my name is Sahil Chawla. I'm an MCAT tutor here at Shemmassian Academic Consulting. Today we'll be going over a sample MCAT CARS passage, and I'll discuss some of the strategies you can use when approaching questions like these on the MCAT. So I've got the passage pulled up here in front of me. I'm basically going to think out loud a bit and read it out loud. And I'll discuss the outlining strategy where you basically write a short summary after each paragraph. And then at the end of a passage, you'll write a summary on the main idea. I find this really useful for comprehension. So if you do struggle with comprehension, I recommend you try this strategy out. And it's really popular. So a lot of students have found success with it. So after we do that, we'll then dive into the questions, and I'll talk about strategies for eliminating answer choices, and what are some key traps you want to watch out for that the AAMC really likes to get students with. So without further ado, let's get to it. Most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with the factitious cares and superfluously coarse labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. Their fingers from excessive toil are too clumsy and tremble too much for that. He has no time to be anything but a machine. How can he remember well his ignorance, which his growth requires, who has so often to use his knowledge? We should feed and clothe him gratuitously sometimes, and recruit him with our cordials before we judge of him. The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. Yet we do not treat ourselves, nor one another, thus tenderly. All right, so that was quite a lot, and there were some big words in there as well, but really what I'm getting is that the author's saying that people spend a lot of time working, and then they don't really get to really enjoy the other things in life, so they miss out on maybe some quality time with friends, family, and so on. Just I really like that sentence. He says here he has no time to be anything but a machine. So if I had to summarize this, I think what I would put is maybe people work hard, but maybe they don't get much leisure because of that. All right, so let's go on to the second paragraph. Some of you, we all know, are poor, find it hard to live, are sometimes, as it were, gasping for breath. I have no doubt that some of you who read this book are unable to pay for all the dinners which you have actually eaten, or for the coats and shoes which are fast wearing or are already worn out, and have come to this page to spend borrowed or stolen time robbing your creditors of an hour. All right, interesting. I'm basically calling out his audience right there, and making some serious accusations. So I'm a little unsure where he's going with this, but if I had to summarize this paragraph, I'm thinking there are these hardships that the poor experience, right? And it kind of puts them in this tricky spot where they got to do some things that maybe aren't so good. And I'm not really sure how to word it. Maybe I'll just put in quotes, stealing, because we talk about this whole stolen time, robbing your creditors of an hour, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I don't really feel like it's the best summary, or, I'm not 100% confident with this, but since time is of the essence for the MCAT, you don't want to get too hung up on writing the perfect summary. Consider the outlining strategy more of a tool, not just for comprehending a passage, but more so also for your focus and just keeping you engaged. Don't think of it as if you don't write a good summary, then the outlining strategy goes to waste. That's not the case. Even if your summaries aren't the best, you're going to still get a lot out of this strategy. So don't get too hung up on having a perfect summary. This is something I'm probably not too happy with this summary right here. I think could be a little better, but I don't want to spend too much of my precious time on writing a good summary when I haven't even gotten to the questions yet. So let's move on to the next paragraph. It is very evident what mean and sneaking lives it's very evident what mean and sneaking lives many of you live, for my sight has been whetted by experience, always on the limits, trying to get into business and trying to get out of debt. A very ancient slough, another's brass, for some of their for some of their coins were made of brass, still living and dying, and buried by this other's brass, always promising to pay, tomorrow and dying today. Insolvent, seeking to curry favor, to get customed by how many modes, only, not state prison offenses, lying, flattering, voting, contracting yourselves into a nutshell of civility, or dilating into an atmosphere of thin and vaporous generosity, that you may persuade your neighbor to let you make his shoes or his hat or his coat or his carriage, or import his groceries for him, making yourself sick, that you may lay up something against a sick day, something to be tucked away in an old chest or in a stocking behind the plastering, or more safely in the brick bank, no matter where, no matter how much or how little. All right, now that was that was a lot, and it's actually really easy here to now start zoning out and not really focusing. So again, we want to employ the outlining strategy here to get our brain to stay focused despite all the big words and some of the nasty accusations the author's making against the audience here. Let's try to come up with a little summary. What I'm really seeing is this idea that this whole rant that he kind of has, let me see if I can highlight it, just kind of around this whole, kind of a lot of this all really feels like a endless list of just grievances he has with maybe like a larger scale problem in society. So it seems like he's really talking about culture, that man is living kind of a I think like hand to mouth existence, or you might think like paycheck to paycheck, where you hardly have enough. So you're doing a lot of these things that you probably really don't want to be doing. It really sounds like a desperate life, or kind of a miserable state of existence to be in. So if I had to summarize this, I'd put maybe man, hand to mouth, and what we're getting, and again, not the perfect summary, but I do want to put in something about how it's like a systemic thing that he's commenting on. So maybe I put like, and it's a miserable system, because I am getting that tone that this is a very negative opinion that the author has here. So with this summary here, I'm touching on the whole like chaotic kind of life people are having, that the author is talking about, with this existence of just constantly trying to, you're in debt, trying to get out of debt, trying to make sure you're not committing crime, then trying to get jobs, blah, 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 all that stuff. And then how this is kind of a systemic issue and not just like a individual problem. All right, so let's move on to the next paragraph. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city you go into the desperate country, and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotype but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes afterward, but it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. Okay, I'm really getting the sense that he's kind of taking the idea of like this system we live in and how it's reflective of like a culture that's not really wise, that it's lacking wisdom, or that most people are living this life that is full of desperation, right? And the author then mentions that is like in their way, not desperation is what characterizes wisdom. So if I had to just summarize this, I would put maybe most they're kind of desperate, so maybe equal sign just for some shorthand. And I like that little quote at the end, that this whole that for wisdom is characterized by not doing desperate things. So maybe I'll just include that as well and just put like a not equals to wisdom, because it also puts a larger commentary than, okay, he could be saying that society is not as wise as it could be, or as progressed as it has the potential to be. So let's move on to the last paragraph now. All right. The whole ground of human life seems to have been gone over by their predecessors, both the heights and the valleys, and all the things to have been cared for. According to Evelyn, the wise Solomon prescribed ordinances for the very distances of trees, and the Romans decided The Romans have decided how often you may go into your neighbor's land to gather the acorns which fall on it without trespass, and what share belongs to that neighbor. Hippocrates has even left directions on how we should cut our nails, that is, even with the ends of the fingers, neither shorter nor longer. Undoubtedly, the very tedium and ennui, which presume to have exhausted the variety and the joys of life, are as old as Adam. Man's capacities have never been measured, nor are we to judge what he can do by any precedents. So little has been tried. Whatever have been thy failures hitherto, quote, be not afflicted, my child, for who shall assign to thee what thou hast left undone, end quote. All right. Now that was a lot too, and there's some words that I actually couldn't even really pronounce, and I haven't really even seen before. But I think what the author is saying is man's capabilities aren't being realized because we've got all these precedents, right? They talk about, see, if we can get highlighter here. They talk about the Romans have already come up with, this thing about how often you go into your neighbor's land, right? Or Solomon had prescribed ordinances on the distances of trees, and even Hippocrates was talking about your nails and how long they should be and how we should cut them and all that. So seems like the author's not a big fan that life has kind of already been prescribed for us, or the way we should live our life. And he believes that this is limiting on man's capabilities. So if I had to summarize this, probably put paragraph 4, right? Or sorry, paragraph 5. And how about man, or maybe restrictions on man's capabilities. I like that. Restrictions on man's capabilities. Yeah, pardon the poor handwriting there. But basically, I wrote restrictions on man's capabilities, just reflecting, again, the author saying that all these things, these precedents that have been set, are just really restricting man from being able to achieve what, greatness he potentially could. And now finally, before we dive into the questions, don't forget, we want to do one more, and that's our main idea. And if I look at this as a whole, what I'm getting is that we got this cultural problem, is what the author's arguing against. That this culture of work is kind of leading to a decay in quality of life, and also restricting man's capabilities. So I would probably put something along the lines of that our culture is high work, but decreasing quality of life. I'm going to just write Q of L. I know what that means, so if I was, on test day referring back to the summary, I know that by Q of L I means quality of life. It's just a shorthand for myself. Feel free to do the same thing for yourself, that, just to save some seconds, which can definitely add up for the MCAT, that you use shorthand notation that you can understand, and then make sure it is something you can understand. It would be really counterproductive if I wrote Q of L, then I came back and what did I mean by Q of L? So don't try to just improvise new ones or something. Just hope they stick. Be a little smart with them. So we'll save some time there by writing that Q of L instead. And also, I want to kind of mention that this is all kind of inhibiting, and I'll use some of our maybe some pathway type notation that you're familiar with, maybe from B&B or bio and biochem passages on the MCAT, but we can apply it here for the summary. I feel as if this whole culture that the author was discussing, that they're arguing that it really inhibits or restricts man's potential. Let's write that. All right, so we got our paragraphs done, and we've got our main idea. Now let's dive right into the questions. Question 1. According to the first paragraph of the passage, the author implies that A, ignorance and mistake are unavoidable. B, the people in their country of discussion have a chance to enjoy finer aspects of life. C, only free countries can enjoy the, quote, finer fruits, end quote, of life. Or D, hard work prevents all enjoyment. So the first thing I notice is options C and D use some extreme wording, which should always make you, pause for a second, or, they basically, extreme words should be a sign that you need to be cautious here with this answer choice and make sure you have very strong evidence. These are oftentimes more likely to be incorrect answers, but that doesn't mean you should immediately just rule them out because of that. But more so that if you do think it could be the answer, you need to make sure that the author did explicitly, or that the passage explicitly backs up this answer choice. So let's look at C first. They say only free countries, right? So that only free countries can enjoy the finer fruits of life. There wasn't anything in this passage here, or in this paragraph, discussing that it was only the free countries. Maybe it's easier if you're in a free country to enjoy those finer fruits, but nowhere did they state that it's exclusively for the free countries. So I'd eliminate C. D, hard work prevents all enjoyment. Again, all enjoyment. Don't really see any discussion about the hard work being the problem here, and more so maybe a culture that has a never-ending obsession with just like work. But there's nothing wrong with working hard. It's just maybe like the ratio of how hard you work, or how much work you're putting in, like how much you're enjoying the rest of your life, or kind of getting that whole well-being in life sorted out. There's nothing really indicating that they believe that hard work in general is going to prevent you from enjoying anything. So go ahead and eliminate D. All right, so let's look at A and B. A, ignorance and mistake are unavoidable. So with this, if we look back to the first sentence, they start off in saying that like most men, even in the comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with and the sentence continues. They don't say all men, they say most men. So that leaves some room that it doesn't mean that it's not avoidable. It's just for most people that is reality, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be the case. Maybe if they put all men, even in this comparatively free country, then we'd have maybe some good reason to consider A, but with the opener being with most, I'd eliminate A. And so that leaves us with B, but let's see if we can justify it. So B is saying that the people in the country of discussion are the ones that get to have a chance, or that the people in the country of discussion have a chance to enjoy a finer aspect of life. And that does seem to be something the first sentence indicates to us, because most men, even in this comparatively free country, through mere ignorance and mistake, are so occupied with the fictitious cares and superfluously coarse labors of life that its finer fruits cannot be plucked by them. It's almost implying as if there are fruits for them that they can pluck, which is what B is saying, that they do have a chance, but again, through mere ignorance and mistake, they're so occupied with work that they can't do that. So B is the best answer. All right, let's go on to the next question. Question 2, suppose an individual who owes a shoemaker money for shoes is currently reading the passage. The author would most likely respond by saying, A, the individual has a right to read the passage. B, the individual should be repaying the shoemaker instead of reading the passage. C, the individual should finish reading the passage and then repay the shoemaker. And D, the individual was robbed by the shoemaker. All right, let's look back to the passage here. And with our outline, we had in paragraph 2, we talked about stealing. So it's probably somewhere around paragraph 2, paragraph 3 area. Somewhere around there we'll find what we're looking for. So in that last sentence of paragraph 2, we see, you've come to this page to spend borrowed or stolen time, robbing your creditors of an hour. All right, so they're using very strong wording here, right? They're using robbing and stolen. And robbing and stealing, these are definitely things considered that you should not do in life. So they could have said that maybe, because stealing and robbing implies that it's immoral and that it wasn't justified, right? Maybe if the author had said something along the lines of, you are taking time, maybe that your creditors wouldn't want you to be using for your own purpose of reading this passage, there could be some room there that there's a belief that it's justified, morally speaking. But because the author's using such intense words like stolen or robbing. I'm getting the sense that they would believe you should repay that shoemaker for time theft by reading my passage. So let's see which answer choice lined up with that. Was B right here. So I'd go with B. There's no indication that the author is concerned with rights at all. There wasn't any discussion really about it, so I'd eliminate A. C, this is, kind of getting into like nitty-gritty details that we don't have any reason to believe that the author wants to prioritize read the passage first, but then go pay then go repay whatever debts you owe. There wasn't a point in the passage where the author was saying, hold off on paying your debts until you finish reading this. So I wouldn't pick C. I'd cross that one out. And D, this is interesting because they say the individual was robbed by the shoemaker. Now, with the main idea that we've gotten, that like the culture and the systemic issues that we have, it's very easy to think that, okay, the individual is being robbed by some systemic issues, but in this particular context, I wouldn't go with saying that the individual is being robbed by the shoemaker or anything of that sort. So I'd eliminate D and just stick with B. And also notice how for D, I'm also kind of making some assumptions that the author would agree with me that, it's about, since the passage has this main idea of restrictions being put on humans or on the people in society, then maybe that's the author believing that people are constantly being robbed. There's maybe a bridge there, but I'm not really sure if that really is the author's opinion, or that could really well just be me projecting and trying to fill in the details or fill in the gaps of my knowledge on what the author believes. So let's wrap this up and do the last two questions now. 3. The author mentions Hippocrates in the final paragraph in order to A. serve as an example for human shortcomings, B. provide concrete instructions for self-care, 3. give an example, or C. give an example of the wide range of instructions left by predecessors, or D. contradict Evelyn's statement. So here, I'm getting the sense that this is more along the lines of asking about what was the purpose of bringing up Hippocrates in that final paragraph, like why did the author even mention it? And if we read through it, we can see that they open with this sentence here. The whole ground of human life basically seems to have been prescribed to us, right? Whole ground of human life seems to some have been gone over by their predecessors, both the heights and the valleys and all things they've already been covered in, so how we should live kind of already been determined for us. And Evelyn gives us an example, talks about the Solomon with the trees and the Romans, what I'm guessing is their conquests or sharing the land with their neighbors. But Hippocrates is then added onto it as like how meticulous it gets. That we have Solomon worried about the trees and regulations there, and then also we have the Romans with bigger picture things, but then even down to how you cut your nails, like it's already been prescribed for you. So I see that as the author saying just how much of life is already kind of determined for us and how we should live it. So C here is the best option. Don't really think that the author was trying to turn this into a self-care manual on how to take care of your nails, so I would eliminate B. D, contradict Evelyn's statement. Again, it's kind of building on Evelyn's statement. Evelyn was focusing on a couple different examples of prescriptions in life, but then Hippocrates then is like the example of Hippocrates tells you just how like meticulous or down to the little details in life that it can get, that even cutting your nails is already covered, right? So we'll eliminate D. Then A, serve as an example for human shortcomings. Again, didn't really get an indication of that, so I'd stick with C. All right, last question. In order to describe how humans should treat one another, the author used an analogy to A, fruits, coats, shoes, nails. All right, so let's look at this. In paragraph 1, we talk about this whole like the bloom on fruits, but there was stuff about coats and stuff right here. So how do I know what the answer is? Well, make sure you're answering the question. So the question is asked is, which of these was used as an analogy, and was used as an analogy for how humans should treat one another. The whole thing about coats and shoes, well, that really had more to do with just the author was saying that you wear these coats and shoes you probably can't even that you probably couldn't even afford to have, and they're probably worn out now. So that's not really about how we should treat one another. And then the nails was just about this whole prescription we have in life. This is how you need to live, right? That's Hippocrates has already determined for us how we should be cutting our nails. So I'd eliminate D. And fruits, if we read that last sentence of that first paragraph, we can back it up here. The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be prepared only by the most delicate handling. Yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly. So there we go. That's how we should be treating ourselves, right? And it's in the using that analogy with the fruits. So A would be the best answer here. And that wraps up this passage. All right, so that's it for the MCAT CARS Practice Passage walkthrough. If you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new videos. And if you'd like to receive a free MCAT question of the day, click the link in the description below and you'll get one emailed to you every single day. All right, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.